Good morning, everybody. We're going to get started. If you could please find a seat. We are going to begin the program. So I want to begin the conference by saying welcome to all of you to the Future California Elections Annual Conference. We're really honored to have all of you here. We have as you've seen, an action-packed agenda. We're going to be covering a great diversity of topics, ranging from implementation of the new California Voters' Choice Act, which was Senate Bill 450 of 2016, to the new voter law, Assembly Bill 1461 from 2015. We're going to be talking about expanding participation in our elections, increasing participation, modernizing the ways in which we conduct our elections, looking at improving the safety, security, transparency, accountability, auditability of our elections. We're going to be talking about how to address the needs of people who have special challenges in participating in elections, whether it be voters for whom English is not their native language, or voters with disabilities, voters serving in the military or living in rural areas, or what have you. So there's a broad scope of issues that are being addressed here. And of course, even though we've been around for 6 years, and we've been doing this work for 6 years, focused on trying to modernize elections and improve participation, this agenda has percolated to the top of the national debate, sometimes for legitimate reasons, but unfortunately oftentimes based on illegitimate allegations of fraud and what have you. So we're going to address some of that today as well, so that people have some truth and some facts and some useful information. This conference has been spectacularly successful. Once again, we have sold every ticket. We will fill every chair. So we apologize to those who aren't able to join us because of the fact that this conference has reached its maximum capacity. Throughout the day, if you're inspired to send out a tweet regarding information that you're hearing or learning here at the conference, our official hashtag is FOCE, F-O-C-E 2017. So that's hashtag FOCE 2017 for your social media. And we'll be throughout the day at various times posting some of those tweets up on the monitors, so you'll have a chance to see them. For those of you for whom this is your first conference, Future California Elections is a 6-year-old collaboration of election administrators, election reform advocates, and civil rights organizations, and all of whom are united by their belief that in a totally nonpartisan effort to improve the quality of our election experience for voters, to make it possible for voters to access democracy in a more accessible and convenient way, that we can work together. And that's what Future California Elections is all about. It's bringing all the stakeholders together to address these problems, working together. The members of our organization, you've seen the logos on the screen, the ACLU of California, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, California, the California Association of Clerks and Election Officials, which we're very honored to have as a member of Future California Elections. This is the statewide organization that represents the county election officials in all 58 counties. California Common Cause, CalPIRG, the California Voter Foundation, California Forward, Disability Rights California, the League of Women Voters of California, MALDEF, the NALEO Educational Fund, Rock the Vote, and Verified Voting. There are a few thank yous I want to say. First of all, to the conference staff, Astrid Garcia Ochoa, Deborah Mack, Rachel Sherman, and Katie Flaherty. I can't tell you how hard these individuals have worked, so please give them a round of applause. Our conference planning committee, it is an unbelievable undertaking to vet all the proposed panels and to select the panels that are going to be at a given year's conference and to organize the program. The all-volunteer conference planning committee is Ophelia Medina from NALEO, Gail Pellerin, the Santa Cruz County Clerk, Andrea Slater from California Common Cause, Pam Smith from Verified Voting, and Tricia Weber, the Assistant Santa Cruz County Clerk. If you're in the room and I just called your name, would you please stand up so we can thank you? Gail is here. Thank you. Ophelia is here. And we're very honored that the founder of Future California Elections is here. Would you please welcome Catherine Hazelton? Thank you, Catherine. She's shy, but she's in the back. And none of this would be possible without the very generous support of the James Irvine Foundation, represented today by Leslie Payne and Annalise Grimm. So hello, Annalise. Our fiscal sponsor for future California elections is Community Partners, and they're represented today by their CEO, Paul Vandeventer, and the program director, Phyllis Owens. I also want to thank our host, the owners of this beautiful facility, the California Endowment, and their CEO, Dr. Robert Ross. I want to thank all the speakers and panelists who have agreed to share their knowledge and information with us today. They are bringing tremendous expertise. And I especially want to thank all of you for joining us. You are bringing your expertise, your perspective, the issues that you work on day in and day out. And we hope that this isn't just a conference where people talk at you. We hope this is a conference where you participate in a dialogue and really engage in the conversation. So we have asked our panelists and speakers to allow for time from the audience. I know that our morning speaker, California Secretary of State, Alex Padilla, is going to afford you that opportunity to ask some questions from the floor. So we're very happy about that. So as you sit through these sessions, whether it's in the breakout sessions in the various conference rooms or here in the Yosemite room, I hope that you will take note of questions that you might have and be prepared to address those questions to the speakers so that we can get them answered. We also, of course, like any good conference, have time for you to collaborate with yourselves. And so if a question doesn't get answered in a session, you might find that speaker in the hallway between sessions during the lunch break, and of course in the reception at the end of the day. So make this an interactive day. Make this an opportunity for yourself to meet people. The name tags are very helpful. If you see somebody and you want to know something about their work, or you just want to trade business cards, please take the initiative, walk right up to them, introduce yourself, and say either a question or ask for their business card. But this is really the networking event of the year for everybody involved in reforming and improving the election system in California. So this is your best opportunity. Some of our speakers, by the way, have traveled very far to be here, and so we really appreciate those of you who have come from Washington, D.C., from Las Vegas, Nevada, from Austin, Texas, from other distant locales, and to make that long journey and to bring your expertise to this conference is greatly appreciated as well. We also are going to ask you to please be sure to complete the conference evaluation forms. Future California elections cannot improve the quality of this conference without direct input from all of you. So throughout the day, we're going to try to remind you to please complete a conference evaluation. And in addition to the normal issues that you constantly are asked to weigh in upon with conferences and the evaluation forms, there's one question I really want you to answer quite specifically for us this year, which is, traditionally, this conference has been a day-and-a-half long conference. This year, in an effort to save expense for many of the nonprofit organizations who participate, we've collapsed it to a single-day conference. I would like your opinion about how that is working. And so at the end of the day today, as you're filling out the conference evaluation form, if you have an opinion on that issue, please offer it, because we will listen and respond to what you, the attendees, have to say. As I say, this conference is really built around you, it's built for you, and we hope that you give us feedback that will help us to make it an ever increasingly better conference for everyone. As you exit this room and turn left, you will see the Joshua Tree breakout room. As you exit this room and turn right, you will find the other two breakout rooms. And of course, this is Yosemite. So as you navigate your way to the breakout sessions, just keep that in mind. Turn left for Joshua Tree, turn right for the other two breakout rooms. And we hope that, and by the way, all of the conference staff are wearing name tags that have a staff ribbon at the bottom. So if you have any problems, any confusion, please just ask one of the staff people, either by identifying them by the name tag or seeing them at the sign-in table. So The Secretary of State has arrived, and I'm going to turn over the podium in a moment. And I just want to share with you two quotes from President Abraham Lincoln. President Lincoln said, "Elections belong to the people. It's their decision. If they decide to turn their back on the fire and burn their behinds, then they will just have to sit on their blisters." So here at today's conference, we're doing everything within our power to prevent those blisters. We want to make sure that everybody is facing the fire and is able and empowered to fully participate in our democracy. But Abraham Lincoln also said, "I'm a firm believer in the people. If given the truth, they can be depended upon to meet any national crisis. The great point is to bring them the real facts and beer." So today, we're going to work on the real facts. And then after the final closing plenary session, we're going to serve real beer. And I hope that all of you will follow the inspiring words of our former president and participate vigorously in today's activity, but also join us for a fun reception before you go home at the end of the conference. And with that, I want to welcome and introduce to you the chair of the Conference Planning Committee from the NALEO Educational Fund. Please welcome Ophelia Medina.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 2017 Future of California Elections Conference. My name is Ophelia Medina. I serve as the Director of State Civic Engagement Policy for NALEO Educational Board, and this year I had the honor to serve as the conference co-chair. Pretty much on behalf of Gail, Tricia, Pam, and Andrea, thank you so much for your attendance this morning. We hope that the conference gives you an opportunity to not only learn about the latest and the greatest developments in the field of elections, but also share your particular expertise with everyone here. So pretty much what Vince says, network, network, network throughout the whole entire day. We really, really do hope that you enjoy today. Our first speaker, and I'm very, very honored to be able to introduce him, is the California Secretary of State Padilla. Since 2006, when he was elected to the California State Senate, he has been nothing but a trailblazer in the state of California. Personally, at NALEO, we have the pleasure to have him as part of our NALEO family. He served as our board president for a couple of years, so I'm very honored to introduce him. He was sworn into our California State Secretary of State in 2016 and in 2015, and since then he has done nothing but remarkable things for the state of California in terms of our election administration policy. So please help me welcome this morning the Honorable Alex Padilla.
Good morning, everybody. Great to be back. Welcome back to Los Angeles. It was about a year ago, right? I had my colleagues from Colorado here, from Washington here, and like I did the year previous to that, kind of given the lay of the land, what we want to do, what we're continuing to do, and we have a lot that we ought to be proud of. But I wanted to start my remarks this morning by sharing a story. I'm going to get to some of the nuts and bolts of the election stuff that we've accomplished and that are in the hopper with the help and support of all of you, but just to try to help set the tone for the day. Because there's a lot going on in politics and government these days, right? That's an understatement. So about three and a half weeks ago, one of the lucky days that I'm home to put breakfast on the table and take my oldest son, Roman, to school before coming downtown and going about my day. And I noticed that Roman, who's usually very energetic, if any of you have ever met him, he's the one that I'm usually chasing, not his little brothers, but Roman. And he's usually very happy and upbeat. And this day, he's just kind of very mellow, which is unlike him. And so I asked him, Roman, are you okay? What's going on? And he's slowly eating his breakfast. And as serious as he can possibly say it, he asked me this question. Can President Trump take us back to the days of segregation? My heart breaks. And I think it's a statement on what's happening in our country right now. When 9-year-olds in America have to worry about questions like that, there's something wrong. And the first thing I can think of saying, and what I told him was, no, Roman, That's why I do what I do. And he perks up. And his next question is, you have that power? And I got to catch myself, right? We've got to manage expectations. And so what comes to mind for me to say is, well, by myself, no. But when a lot of us work together, absolutely. Right? So I got my civics lesson or reminder that morning of why it's important to do what we do and why it's important for us to work together. And so a lot of what I want to share this morning is the result of us having worked together and what I think we all still want to accomplish going forward that we'll achieve by working together. So thank you for having me this morning. Thank you to Vince and Astrid and the entire FOS team. These gatherings continue to be even more important as time has gone on. And of course, a thank you to Irvine, whose vision it was to have us all come together to begin with. So as I stand here today, I'm a little bit past the first half of my first term as Secretary of State. And when I spoke in front of you a couple of years ago, I made a couple of promises, a couple of pledges to do things like help modernize how we do elections in the state of California. Do things like not just protect and defend, but advance voting rights in the context of Shelby v. Holder and what we saw happening in other states. And to, of course, directly engage communities about democracy and civic participation. And I feel proud that we've made significant progress on all these fronts. You know, I continue to not just do the day job in the office and through here in Los Angeles, but to travel the state, visiting high schools, colleges, naturalization ceremonies, military bases, and community events to talk to people about why it's important to register and registering them, why it's important to vote, and pushing people to vote, making it easier for people to vote. Last fall, we certified VoteCal as a system of record in the state of California, something that we all knew was way overdue. Yeah, I'll take that, absolutely. And it's not just new technology that has us now living with a statewide centralized voter registration database, but we knew that for technological reasons and for symbolic reasons, it was a trigger to a lot of other reforms that we could then implement in California. We're now empowering voters to check their registration status online or through our first agency app, to find their polling place online or through our first agency app, or to review campaign finance information online or on their smartphones through our first agency app. Last year, we set an all-time record for voter registration in the state of California. When the deadline closed for the November general, we were at 19.4 million voters on the rolls eligible to cast ballots, a historic high for the state of California. And I think we're going to be at 20 million before you know it. We're still growing. That 19.4, by the way, that's more than the population of 46 states, to give you a sense of the scale. And I remember getting told by some very good friends, Alex, you've got to brace yourself. You did such a great job of promoting registration that it looks like our turnout rate's going to go down because it's just a math equation, right? How many people vote versus how many people are registered. Well, Californians proved them wrong. We had record turnout in November, 14.6 million ballots cast. So the percentage didn't spike, it didn't dip, but the raw numbers was nearly 1 million more than the previous high of 2008. So we're doing a heck of a job working together in registering and getting people to vote. We even set an agency record. I know this group loves getting into the weeds on this stuff, so I'm going to tick off a couple of other markers that we're proud of. We had Secretary of State staff and volunteers participating in Election Day monitoring in 49 of the 58 counties in California. Next time we'll get all 58, but we're leaps and bounds above the previous level of coverage on Election Day eyes and ears out there ensuring that elections run smoothly and nobody's voting rights is infringed upon. And given the fear that many communities were experiencing and the potential for voter intimidation that people were expecting, we wanted to make sure we were out there and able to respond if anything were to arise. So I also want to highlight as an example of what happens when we work together. That's our theme here. Over the past several years, researchers and advocates like the California Voter Foundation, in coordination with county elections officials, demonstrated the need to improve the vote-by-mail process. More and more voters are choosing to vote by mail, as we all know. And just to give you some metrics, in 2008, 41% of voters, about 5.7 million that year, cast their votes by mail. In 2016, the figure grew to 57%, or about 8.4 million ballots. So we're clearly growing the vote by mail universe in the state of California. Another important metric, though, in 2008, 2.1% of vote-by-mail ballots were rejected. That's about 130,000 if you do the math. 130,000 Californians whose vote was not counted. Their voice was not heard. And working together, we got to the reasons as to why that's the case. Things like missing signatures or mismatched signatures on the envelope when their ballots came in. Well, since 2008, we've passed laws like the postmark +3 that addressed at least the ballots that might have shown up the day after the election or 2 days after the election, even though they were sent before the polls closed. With the postmark +3, we're now able to count and add to the tally a lot of what was previously too late vote-by-mail ballots. And now counties have, Dean, 8 days to reconcile if there's issues with vote-by-mail voters. So clearly we're making improvements. So in 2016, what was that rejection rate? It was 0.69%. Only 58,000 vote-by-mail ballots that had some sort of issue. We dropped it by more than half from the 2008 marker. So we're making tremendous headway here. And I hope you've seen, not just in our work up to and including Election Day, but in our public statements consistently since Election Day, we are working feverishly to open up access to the ballot here in California, not to suppress the vote as I see happening in far too many other states across the country. You know what I'm talking about. And we did all this before new laws will kick in to advance voting rights here in the state of California. And what are some of these laws that are coming our way? Working together, we made the automatic voter registration the law here in the state of California with the passage of AB 1461. That's been passed by the legislature, signed by the governor, and we're now in the process of implementation so that soon every eligible Californian, when they apply for or renew a driver's license or a state ID, will automatically be registered to vote in the process, unless they choose to opt out. But we think that through this law, we're going to take an even bigger bite of the 6 million plus eligible but unregistered Californians and continue to move the needle significantly in the voter registration files. So we're going to blow past the 20 million, well on to 21, 22 before you know it. And as of, we also created last year, so AB 1461 was 2 years ago. Last year, the legislature passed, signed into law, Senate Bill 450, which again, many of you helped craft, many of you helped advocate for in the legislature, and now we're in the process of implementation where a handful of counties starting next year will go to a new way, a more modern way of conducting elections that gives voters choice. More choices, imagine that, of when, where, and how to cast a ballot. So automatic registrations are going to continue to move the needle on the registration side. Senate Bill 450 will continue to move the needle on the voter turnout side. And as of January 1st of this year, coupled with all of this, same-day registration is the law of the land. Those of you who have been at this for a while know that the law was passed several years ago. The law was signed several years ago, but its implementation was contingent upon VoteCal being the system of record. Well, we did that last fall, and so as of January of this year, voters can now register to vote and cast their ballot even after what used to be known as the voter registration deadline. These voters' conveniences, in my opinion, are just common sense. How do we, yes, maintain the security and integrity of our elections, but do what we can to make it easier for people who are eligible to register to vote to be registered, and make it easier for people who are registered to vote to actually cast a ballot. It doesn't get more American and patriotic than that. Unfortunately, we're not seeing that from so many other states. And here, in a way that maybe my friends at ACLU can appreciate, because oftentimes, including as most recently as these travel bans that we're hearing about coming out of the White House, people talk about public safety without due regard to civil liberty, right? Sometimes it's hard or tricky to achieve the appropriate balance, but civil liberty and public safety are not mutually exclusive. And so it is with elections. The security and integrity of our elections is important to maintain. I take voter fraud and allegations of voter fraud very, very seriously. But we also have to keep in mind access to the ballot for United States citizens. Sometimes it can be a balance, but they are not mutually exclusive. And we've got to keep that in mind when we see state policies being proposed and federal policies being proposed or changed as well. So if you think back on the last couple of years, we've accomplished a lot here in California. And at times it's hard to look past the shock for many. I know this is a nonpartisan gathering. The shock for many of the outcome of the presidential election from last November. Secretary of State hat off, Alex Padilla hat on. It still feels like a punch in the gut for me. But I want to share a few thoughts about the state of our democracy. I'll put my Secretary of State hat back on. The good news. People are paying attention to politics and government in a way that they haven't in a long, long time. I don't know what the number is, but I'm willing to bet big money that the number of Google searches are way up on the question of what is the Electoral College. At least it was in November, right? And whether you like it or not, people have had a harsh reminder that no, there's not just one or two, but there are three branches of government, the way our founding fathers set up our democracy. You know just as well as I do, these are some challenging times for our country. And we have an important moment to build off of right now, that people are paying attention to civics and government, an important moment and an opportunity for us to capture and leverage and re-energize people getting involved, not just in registering to vote and not just in voting, but being involved in their communities. Talking about our founding fathers, they were brilliant in this respect. The office of citizen was designed to be the most powerful office in our democracy. It is a government of the people, by the people, for the people. The citizen is the foundation of our democratic system and the ultimate protector of our freedoms, as laid out in the Constitution, to promote the general welfare, to ensure domestic tranquility, to secure the blessings of liberty, and to form a more perfect union. Each citizen has a responsibility for the prosperity, peace, and progress for all. We are in this together. Yet today, the office of citizen is under assault. We're witnessing a wholesale attack on the power of the citizen to uphold their constitutional responsibilities because their right to vote is under attack. By repeating lies about voter fraud allegations as the cause for losing the popular vote, the president is dangerously attacking citizens' faith in free and fair elections. It's wrong, it's a lie, and it's dangerous. And I know the playbook, because we've seen it in state after state. spread lies about voter fraud, and then justify changes to the law that have the effect of making it tougher for people who are eligible to be registered voters, or make it tougher for people who are registered voters to actually cast a ballot. Since 2010, 20 states passed laws to make it harder to register to vote. They've eliminated or restricted early voting. They've enacted voter IDs in very creative fashions. This agenda, that agenda, not our agenda, but that agenda, takes a jackhammer to our democracy and our citizens' right to vote. So what can we do? I get asked this question a lot, especially when I travel. Well, you're from California. You're from the land of the resistance. What are you all doing to protect voting rights and advance voting rights? And a lot of other issues Californians care about for that matter. So here's a secret. Here's the three-pronged strategy for the resistance. Write this down. LLO, not LOL, LLO. Legislate, litigate, organize. Right? As the federal government, whether it's through executive orders, the Congress, we will see changes in policy that is contrary to the policy direction of the state of California on a number of issues, including voting rights. What can we do? To the extent that we can and have jurisdiction, we'll pass laws locally to continue to advance policy in the direction of strengthening voting rights and civil rights. There's going to be some activities where between federal jurisdiction and states' rights, we may not have that ability, but we can litigate. We can find ways to push back against changes to the policies that we believe are harmful to California families and the California economy. And we have a great new partner in the Attorney General, Javier Becerra, to be able to do so. And the third prong is organize. Organize, organize, organize. Like millions of Americans did across the country. My wife Angela and I joined the 750,000 marchers on January 21st right here in downtown Los Angeles to speak up and push back. Many of you might have participated in one of the women's marches somewhere in the state of California. But it wasn't just in Los Angeles, it wasn't just in California, it was across the country and around the world. And for anybody who may question whether showing up at a rally makes a difference, you're damn right you do. You're damn right it does. You saw the coverage of it. You saw the chatter and discussion of it in the days after. Those demonstrations of millions of people made a difference. It sent a strong message. And here's another great example. About a week later, and I was flying home from Boston after having spoken at an event back in Massachusetts, when the executive order, the initial travel ban was put out. By the time I landed, you saw thousands and thousands of protesters, not just at LAX, but at airports around the country. Why do I point that one out? Because while the Women's March people said, well, of course, with enough time and enough planning, enough organizing, you can turn out big crowds like that. The protests against the travel ban were spontaneous. There was no Facebook page up a month before saying, sign up, RSVP here. That just happened. And equally forceful, people had to take notice whether they agreed with the president or not. These are examples of the desire, of the passion, of the hunger for people to be involved in their democracy in some way, shape, or form. And a reminder that it doesn't begin or end at voter registration or voter turnout. And we've got to keep organizing. Keep organizing around issues, keep organizing around causes, because the most important office in this land is the office of citizen. And it is strongest when it is an engaged citizen. I also have to take a page out of the history books here, because as I've been recanting all too often these last 2 years, in California we have a special appreciation, given our experience, of Proposition 187. A lot of us remember 1994 and the political environment that we, yes, Big Blue California, lived in just 20 years ago. a measure was on the ballot that sought to deny immigrants and children of immigrants from some basic social services. Like, could your kids go to school? Or could you go to an emergency room and see a doctor if you were sick but uninsured? Look at the dynamic, not just of pre-election day of Proposition 187. Yes, there was rallies. Yes, there was organizing. Yes, there was voter registration and attempts at turnout in defeating the measure. But the measure passed, ultimately thrown out in court. But what's happened in California since the passage of Proposition 187? You saw untold numbers of people like my parents who had been living here as legal permanent residents for decades, never thinking about becoming a citizen, finally saying, where do I apply? And those waves of people who became citizens post-187, and people who registered to vote post-187, and people who might have been registered, just not frequent voters, beginning to vote regularly post-Proposition 187, changed the political landscape in California drastically, and I believe permanently. I hope that's what we're going to see play out in the rest of our country. I hope it doesn't take 20 years for that to happen. But it is a path forward. It is a reason for hope. It is a model, a playbook to follow, a playbook that's much better than denying citizens the right to cast a ballot. So do you feel me when I say we're living in an interesting time, an important time, and why we need to work together? This is not an exaggeration, folks. History is calling us. Will you answer that call? As a good friend of mine is asking a lot of people each and every day these days, this is one of those where were you moments. Let's remember our history, but let's think about the future. Our kids and our grandkids, when they look back at 2016, 2017, and the history books and the law books will document how our voting rights and civil rights were under assault, they're going to say, Mom, Dad, Grandma, Grandpa, where were you? What did you do? Did you just say, well, my family's going to be okay? Life goes on as normal? Or will you join me in standing up and speaking up and pushing back and pushing forward? I promise you this, as California Secretary of State, I'm answering that call. Give me the phone. I want to do everything I can within my powers each and every day to fight against laws here and across the country, any executive orders that will attempt to reverse our voting rights and our civil rights because we fought too hard for them to begin with. And I know, looking around this room, that I got partners in that fight. I know you're going to join me. We need each and every one of us to stand up and to keep organizing and to keep fighting. Do it. We're going to win. Why? Because we're going to do it together. Thank you. So Vince, I'm going to ask for your indulgence here. I do have one more item before I step away. And by the way, sneak preview, please don't tweet about this yet. I'm going to embargo you for an hour, okay? I'm going to race off here in a few minutes to RFK High School, where we're going to announce that we launched not just pre-registration of 16 and 17-year-olds, another thing that we worked together on. Hannibal Jackson, did the bill a couple of years ago. We want to take another step further. We have pre-registration on paper. We have online registration. Why not do online pre-registration for 16 and 17-year-olds? So give me an hour. We'll make it official. But you heard it here first. But before I do that, I want to take a few moments to recognize one of the Fos family who is moving on. Lori Schellenberger has served as director of the ACLU of California's Voting Rights Project for 5 years. The first major election legislation I authored was in partnership with Lori and the ACLU. When she's not litigating, even sometimes suing me, That's okay. She's been a tough and reliable partner in the fight for voting rights. Her work has included the enfranchisement of nearly 10,000 of formerly incarcerated Californians as we've worked to restore their voting rights. An increase in voter registration at state agencies, California being the first state in the nation to require our healthcare exchange to offer an opportunity to register to vote for people coming through, and successful statewide efforts to monitor polling places and assist voters with challenges on election day. I want to thank Laura. Get up here, Lori. Where? Come on. I want to thank Lori. Surprise.
Yes, very surprised.
I want to thank Lori for your fight, which I know will continue, for your partnership, for your commitment, for your dedication. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Thank you. Vince is making me take questions. I got 5-10 minutes tops, so I'll try to be brief in my responses.
Please raise your hand. We have volunteers with microphones, so we'll bring a mic to you. There's a question.
All right.
So we'll go here, and then here, and then there. Real brief questions.
Yeah,
please.
good morning. Kim Alexander, California Voter Foundation. I was wondering if you could share your thoughts about the DHS designation of elections as critical infrastructure, and if you welcome that, and what you think the future holds in that issue.
Great. No, very insightful question. In my opinion, sort of the verdict is still out. For those who may not have caught the news, the initial conversation about whether or not to declare our election systems, our voting equipment as quote-unquote critical infrastructure started back in August, when there was initial chatter about potential hacking, rigging of the elections. I've been on a number of calls. I'm now part of a Department of Homeland Security cyber working group, right? Something I didn't anticipate when I ran for Secretary of State, but here we go. And in talking with the secretaries from across the country and DHS, they decided to forego any formal designation until after the election, still making their resources available to be helpful in defending against any malicious behavior or attacks. But a formal designation was put off, and about a week before the end of the Obama administration, we got the call. DHS decided to do it. So what does that mean? What's different post-official designation that wasn't available to us from a security or resource standpoint before? What are the benefits? What are the limitations on federal involvement now in our elections that have been historically run by states? And not too many answers to our questions. Well, now we have a change in administration, new president, new Secretary of Homeland Security, and those questions are still unanswered. I kind of had a sense for what the answers were in the previous administration, but not the new administration. So it's an open dialogue. Through the National Association of Secretaries of State, NAS has a formal opposed position to the designation. I was a no vote on that, not because I oppose the designation or because I support the designation, but because I want the answers to my questions so I can figure out where I should stand here. So it's an ongoing conversation.
Emily with CalPERC, and of course I'm excited about online pre-registration launch, so I don't want
Share
to
the
keep
link.
you.
Share the link.
But I am wondering, the elections issue has become so partisan, but it does feel like the Republicans have had a hard time coming together around healthcare and other issues too. And do you have any advice for some of us civic engagement groups to try and find some allies and reasonable voices from the right, to talk about how important our election systems are, just like who we should be working with?
Yeah, as far as elected officials or
other secretaries of state, or just good moderate voices.
Yeah. So come to NAS, everybody, and meet them firsthand, because there are some moderate voices amongst my Republican colleagues as well. But I've always felt best when I'm armed with just great information, right? Things like, when people say, oh, automatic registration, well, California offers licenses to undocumented, and now you're registering people to DMV. Isn't this systemic voter? Like, no, folks. And if you really stop and look at the facts, the reason we offer voter registration through DMV to begin with is it's a federal requirement that was made law on a bipartisan basis. Things like online voter registration, which started off as a good government idea in Arizona, right? So when you kind of peel it back to its core, who can be against allowing people to register to vote if they're eligible, or casting a ballot if they're registered? Start with Secretary Wyman in Washington. She's pretty middle of the road here. Oh, there's also, I'll make a plug for Cal Matters. Anybody seen Cal Matters this morning? Great article just laying out the numbers and the case on, is there massive voter fraud in the state of California or not? Check it out.
Question way over. Yes.
Yes. I had a question. Is there kind of a risk with this looking into voter fraud that President Trump wants to impose, as far as making it more difficult for people to vote, and as an excuse to register and to vote, because they're looking for something that doesn't exist? So do you think there's a potential outcome that's going to be really negative?
Right. Unfortunately, I don't know. So here's sort of a quick chronology of events. Election Day, November 8th, Thanksgiving weekend, my phone is buzzing off the hook. I thought it was a quiet weekend with the family, but Donald Trump was tweeting about massive voter fraud, 3 to 5 million illegal votes. Well, do we respond to that or not? If we respond to everything he's going to be tweeting, it's going to be a long 4 years. But then he follows it up with calling out California. So we had to defend our honor. There's no evidence, no proof that shows massive voter fraud, certainly not at the scale that he's claiming. So then the story kind of went away after a couple of weeks. In January, he did it again, no longer as candidate Trump or President-elect Trump, but as President Trump. So again, we have to refute, we've got to push back, we've got to put the truth out there and defend our honor. And then the issue seemed to go away because he said, well, okay, I'm going to assign Vice President Pence to lead an inquiry or an investigation. And then the next Sunday, one of his surrogates is talking about massive voter fraud yet again. So I can't help but think, well, they already reached the conclusions, and now they're going to do an investigation to justify the conclusions? I don't know. If history is any indicator, my fear is they're setting the tone for changes to law or changes to policy when it comes to voting rights. A question I get asked is, well, will you cooperate with the investigation? The only reason I don't say yes, because the natural, responsible answer would be to say yes, is I don't know what they're asking for. To this day, it's been months since the initial allegations came out. Not one word, despite our requests and invitations, not one word from Team Trump or the White House now with any proof or evidence of voter fraud for us to investigate, because we can and we do. And no word from them on an investigation where we may be asked to cooperate with. Is it just numbers? Well, Cal Matters laid out some numbers this morning. There you go. And don't just take our word for it. There's academic studies, there's foundation studies that shows voter fraud is exceedingly rare. Numbers are small, percentages are minuscule, and they're always isolated. And more often than not, something that's perceived to be voter fraud is usually an innocent or clerical error, right? Like if there's an Alex Padilla Jr. and an Alex Padilla Sr. in the same house and you sign in the wrong box. That is not malicious voter fraud. And I can tell you this, as of today, there's 0 cases of non-citizen voting in the state of California. We haven't seen any proof or evidence of that. So where they're coming from, I think I know. What's the state of an investigation? I don't know, because we haven't heard anything, but I fear where they're going with this. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all very much. As you know, I have an important announcement to get to.
Thank you so much.